Welcome to Grail Country. I have a guest joining me for the first time today who reached out to me after he saw my talk with Richard Rowland about why Christians should play role-playing games. My guest today is GM DeFoggi. He has written for Torg Eternity, 13th Age, Savage Worlds. He's written and published through Osprey Games, Jackal's the Bronze Age fantasy role-playing game, which has 3 books using a D100 system and a fantasy Levant setting. He co-owns Strange Owl Games, which publishes Space 1889 and Emboria, which is Richard's game, which I kickstarted and is excellent. And we're gearing up to release a version of Tim Brown's Dragon Kings, which is kind of like their take on the Dark Sun setting from D&D. He also streams for himself through Iconic Publishings, and he does work with Kevin from Palladium Games, kind of chronicling the history of Palladium on the Palladium Books channel. I'll make sure that I provide links to his relevant publishing sites and streaming platforms in the description of the video. And join me in welcoming to the stage, JM.
Hello.
John Matthew, right? Is that the JM?
It's John Matthew. My dad is John, but didn't want me to be a junior, so they cursed me to a name that fits on no official forms for the rest of my life because of that hyphen. But
gotcha. Yeah. It's kind of a bit of a, I don't know. I come from a Southern family, so having somebody with 2 names isn't that weird. Yeah. So, my mom was Velma Ann. She goes by Ann, though. She really doesn't like the Velma part.
Yeah, I met my wife the first day I met the woman who would be my wife at college. She was like, "That name is too long. I'm going to call you JM." And I was like, "You can call me whatever you want." And JM stuck from that on because it's what she calls me. So
where I want to start here, since it's the point of connection, like the reason that we found out that each of us exists, is that the mutual connecting point was Richard.
Yes.
So tell me about your relationship with Richard, how you met Richard, how you became involved with Richard's project. So all about Richard.
All right. Well, so I'm going to peel back. No. So I met Richard actually on Google Plus. So I actually met him through a mutual friend of ours, a guy named Ben. I was, G Plus was in its heyday. Numenera had just come out, and I know I'm a huge Gene Wolfe fan, so I bought into Numenera heavily.
Oh, you're already my new best friend.
I'm actually I think I mentioned I'm re-listening to Shadow of the Torture. I'm doing my every so many year reread of Books of the New Sun, and I'm nearing the end of Shadow of the Torture. But so I was going to run.
All right. So here, okay. I have to just stop you right there because
go for it.
I've been looking for someone to do a series of analysis on the symbolism in Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun.
Oh wow.
And I don't know. That might be something. Let's kick around that after the fact. Let's kick around that. Let's see how Richard feels about that, because
I would love to do that.
Richard likes it too, and knows a thing or two about symbolism. So.
Yes, he does. He has this. He works with this company. I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Symbolism World, something like that.
A symbolic world treatment of the. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to play a role in just to plant that seed, even if I have nothing to do with it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, please continue.
No, so I put out a post for I was going to run a play-by-post game of Numenera, and I got it all put together, and my son was born, and so I ended up handing it off to another game master, who was a friend of mine. But one of the guys in the group, he and his wife joined, and we started talking, and we hit it off, and we were talking about Christianity, and we were talking about gaming, and we were talking about comic books. And he introduced me to his best friend, Richard. And so we kind of kicked around and talked a little bit. And I remember Ben was like, "Hey, the new Cypher system game is coming out. It's called The Strange. We were gonna put together a group to play it. We really wanted to give it a shot. Are you free over New Year's? Between the week between Christmas and New Year's?" And I was like, "Yeah, who's gonna run it?" And Ben was like, "I was kind of hoping you would run it." So I ran this little two-shot adventure for Richard and Ben and another one of our friends, and that turned into, we decided to start up a Numenera campaign, and that ran 3 years, I think. And Richard and I have been friends ever since. We've been gaming ever since. We always bounced ideas off of each other. It was interesting as Richard was exploring the path that was taking him down towards orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. I was in my master's program at Fuller and really moving away from I was raised Assemblies of God. And so I was too. For all have sinned and fall short of the assemblies of God. So we were talking about this, exploring traditional Christianity and kind of going. We were on parallel paths. I like to say I landed. I go to a church here in the DFW area in St. Mark's. It's a high church Anglican, and we landed there because, although in my heart I would have gone. Is it
REC? Is it ACNA? What part of the
ACNA?
Okay, we're ACNA too.
Oh yeah, so
we're in the same
over
same church.
Arlington, I think is where it's at.
Wait a minute, Arlington. Do you know Father John Allen?
I do know Father John Allen.
Father John Allen used to be the rector of our parish.
No way.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, hilarious.
And actually, now it's also interesting because
I've been to your church.
The little stone building, kind of down off Cooper.
No, maybe it's a newer one because it was actually the one I went to was pretty large. It was in Arlington though, because when I was the first year or 2 years ago when I went to NTRPG Con, I decided I would go and pay a visit to Father Allen.
Okay.
And visit his church, and so I was there.
But I think so. I know Father Allen because we do all of the little Anglican churches in the area, right?
Gotcha.
These days, but Father Cruikshank and Father Jordan are my priests. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think he's not like he's like an associate there. He was the rector of our parish, but then he took a position as an associate there.
Awesome.
Because they could pay him more. And he has a family,
Oh yeah, I mean, that's why we didn't. We tried a couple of Catholic churches. My wife was like, we're moving. We had just moved from Colorado, and she was like, "Listen, I know this is important to you, so let's try." She didn't want to go Baptist, so we tried a couple of Orthodox churches. We tried a couple of Catholic churches, and the Anglican service and music just felt like home to her. So
yeah. Well, I mean, we have it nailed down for the music.
Yeah,
nothing can touch the Anglican hymnal.
Oh, and it's we lucked out. So the choir director and the organist at our church, they're both doctors of music. He taught music at UT Arlington, and he built the organ. So it's. We tried going to the shorter spoken service because they'll do a short service at 9 and then they do the full as Father Cruikshank calls it, smells and bells.
Yeah.
We just were like, never again. Like we want the immersion, we want the singing, we want the choir, we want to call, we want to sing our responses. So
yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So Richard and I have been gaming together. He helped. I would bounce ideas off of Jackals when I was writing that with him. And then when it came about the time that he was, I'd started Strange Owl Games with my business partner, Tim Brown. And I was like, hey, I got this guy. He's got a great game and he's using my system for it. And that's where Amboria the RPG came from.
That's so cool. So let's go back in time a little bit because So that we established, and that we have. That's weird that we have multiple unknown connections unknown to us.
It's quite so.
Yeah. So okay. So how did you start gaming in the first place? What age were you when you started, and what was about it that captured your attention?
So I was in 5th grade. And my buddy Angel came up to me in the lunchroom, and Angel and I were always we were reading comics. We were always debating who would win.
Yeah,
I would save up money, and Angel was just an amazing artist, even in grade school. I still have some of his pieces up on the wall. And I would, basically pay him to draw my favorite characters.
Right.
And he came up one day and he was like, hey, I got this book. Somebody gave it to me for my birthday. I can't make heads or tails of it, but it looks like something you'd be interested in. I'll trade you your lunch for it. And I was like, okay. And it was Palladium's Heroes Unlimited revised with the Jim Steranko cover.
Oh, interesting.
And I read that thing cover to cover, and I came away with the idea that, hey, this is a way to generate superheroes and see how they would fight each other for writing.
I don't know that I've ever met anyone before whose entry into role-playing games was supers. That is okay.
Yeah, it was supers and it was Palladium. So
it was Palladium. Yeah,
I'm an outlier. But I didn't realize it was a game. And in junior high, like first week, one of my friends was like, hey, we're going to go play this game.
That's important. The thing you said, you didn't realize it was a game.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I was making characters, and I would be like, well, this guy would clearly beat this guy. I didn't have any of the dice. I mean, I had like D6s, so I knew.
What year was this? What year was this?
Would have been
early 90s?
Yeah, late 80s, early 90s. Like
okay. Yeah, I just wanted, for the sake of the audience, who's like maybe younger people in the audience who are like, what? How could you not know? It's like, no, this is the thing. It's like in the olden days, someone could buy you a copy of a role-playing game and you would still have no idea how it works because we didn't have people like streaming online showing us how to do it. And they're like, it's the kind of thing that it's like, once you start doing it, it becomes obvious what it's doing.
Yes.
But you kind of have to just start doing it. And it's easiest to get into it if someone shows you how. And figuring out on your own can be quite difficult. So it's not really, to me, it's not that strange at all that it's like you didn't know it was a game.
No, yeah. And I like whenever anyone asks what it was like gaming in the 80s and 90s, I'm like, well, there's two things you need to know because a lot of people will tell you what it was like. One, you really did need someone to show you, like all of the.
There had to be an initiation.
Yeah, exactly. So we can talk about this later if you want. But I wrote a paper for a book coming out called "The Golden Key: Recapturing the Sacred Imagination."
Yeah, I look forward to seeing that.
It's on dice and myth and role playing games as like a liturgical process, and like you have to be initiated and. Right. There was no going and watching an actual play or jumping on YouTube and finding, Grail Country Gaming where, Alexander is going to explain, Adventure Conquer King to you. Yeah. It was, you had to know somebody. But the other thing was a lot of people want to talk about how exclusionary gaming was in the 80s and 90s. And I can tell you from experience, while there were probably bad actors, the majority of us we were desperate to get 4 people to sit around a table with us and play these fantasy games that we were playing. It didn't matter if you were a jock, a cheerleader, a nerd, an outcast, whatever. We wanted you at the table because we needed people. We were just desperate to have, a quorum to play our games. Mm-hmm. So I sat down and I got to play GURPS. And at the end of the lunch period, it was a Friday. I remember it was a Friday because I went home and I knew 3 things. This was amazing. That game I had at home was this role-playing game thing. And I think I could do a better job than the guy who introduced me. And so I took over the gaming.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's it. Yeah, that's actually right. Because it's like, and that's actually kind of my story too, right? Okay, so I first received the copy. I had gotten sick. I had really bad asthma as a kid.
Okay.
I'm still asthmatic, but I haven't had a serious attack in a long time. But I had really severe attacks when I was a child. And after one of my serious attacks, I ended up was in the hospital. I had a really severe attack. I ended up in the hospital with pneumonia. And my mom was like, wanted to get me something to make me feel better when I was getting out of the hospital. And I had been reading Boys Life magazine.
Okay.
In the hospital. I'm 10 years old, and I see this ad for this game, Dungeons and Dragons. And that's what I said I wanted. And my mom bought it for me. She brought it to the hospital, and God bless her, tried to figure out how to play it with me. So we knew it was a game, but we didn't know how to play it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't obvious from just reading the rule book. Like, it tells you, but it doesn't really, it doesn't, even though it tells you how to play it, you don't actually understand it when you haven't ever seen it.
Right.
So I got out of the hospital, and it's like, I kind of put it away. I was kind of bummed because I was really excited about it, but I couldn't figure out how to play it. But when we moved, and we ended up moving next door, and the family next door had an older son. They had a son who was a year younger than me, who's still one of my very close friends to this day. His name is Shane, and he had an older brother, Rick. And his older brother, Rick, taught me how to play. And that was Rick, God bless him, wasn't very good, but he showed me how to play. Yeah. And pretty soon I was actually running when I was 11, I was running games for Rick and his high school age friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because I knew I could do a better job of it once I figured out what it was.
Right. And it unlocks something as soon as you see it. As soon as you see it all come together, it unlocks, like, especially in kids that age, right? 11 to 13. My son's just like, he's fallen in love with Savage Worlds, and he's running that for his friends. Like,
that is peak gaming age. Like, I mean, anybody can play it, but for young men between the ages of 11 and 13, it's something magical.
It really is. It unlocks your imagination. I think it teaches, especially if you're playing in kind of, like the Dungeons and Dragons era, oeuvre, if you will, right? You're getting taught kind of basics of, like, there's morality in Dungeons and Dragons, or at least there was in the older editions.
Yeah.
You had, alignment meant something. Going out and, it in an age where young men don't have kind of the outlets that we had in previous eras, like, you're able to recreate some of those outlets on the fantasy table,
right?
And you go out into the wilds and explore and craft a story for yourself, and that's just amazing.
Yeah, my son is really big on the exploration, like bigger than most people on the exploration phase of the game. And like his thing with that is like, no, like that exploration phase. He said he thinks Gygax was a genius who understood this. And when he was designing Dungeons and Dragons, that there's actually like a primal human need that is being fulfilled in the exploration phase of the game when it's being done well.
Yeah, there's I've read, my son and I, we read every morning. We do our daily office, and then we're reading something. Right now we're doing Broken Sword by Paul Anderson, but we did
Paul Anderson.
Oh, nice. So good. We did the Malorian and the Belgariad, so kind of like early like American fantasy. And right, there's this scene where they see the largest mountain that they've ever come across, and all of the guys in the party are like, well, what would it actually take to climb that thing? And the women in the party are like, but why would you want to? And they're like, well, no one else has done it. Like, what? Yeah. And I'm like, that resonates with young men, and to me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I didn't get into D&D until high school. I was firmly up in the Palladium camp. I ran a Heroes Unlimited campaign, and then I got Rifts, and that just blew the doors off my imagination. I do like to say that in the middle of the Satanic Panic, the church drove me into the arms of Dungeons and Dragons, because there was a guy at my church who I played BattleTech with, and he heard that I was running, I think it might have been D6 Star Wars at that time. And he's like, well, if you're going to play role-playing games, you have to play Dragon Raid. And I'm like, well, what's Dragon Raid? I love learning new games. And he's like, it's the Christian role-playing game. And he sat my gaming group at the church down and ran a thing of Dragon Raid for us. And he's like, what did you think? And I was like, honestly? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I think Dungeons and Dragons has to be better than this game. And I went and bought my PE Player's Handbook. And then I fell in love with D&D, because there's something like mythologically archetypal about
the whole that thing was such a weird cultural phenomenon too, because it's like, I was very resentful of my So my mom, who bought the game for me in the first place, God bless her. I love my mom, but man, we were Assemblies of God, and like, so that in '81, when I wanted it from an ad in a magazine, it was okay, but a few years down the road, where it's starting to get more attention negatively within the world that we live in, it's like, oh, you can't be playing that. Wow. No more of that. So I would have to do it on the slide. But here's the thing, though. It's like I was playing Paladins.
Yeah.
It's not like,
No one cared that I was playing Rifts. I mean, I had to like brown paper bag, where you would make a book cover for it, because the cover of the Rifts book is a little salacious, to be wandering around, as a 13-year-old with it. But no one cared as long as I was like, well, what are you doing? Well, we're playing this game of imagination. It's got robots and dragons and knights, and they're like, oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, as long as you didn't say the brand, you're fine.
As long as you didn't say the brand.
Yeah. So that's how I started. This is how my first foray into designing came. It's like, oh, I had to figure out a way to be able to play D&D without playing D&D. Yeah. So the very first game I created was essentially a badly made D&D clone that only used D6 that I could raid from the Monopoly game.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have any funny, suspicious looking dice. And I called it Chivalry in a Dark Age. That was my title for it. And that's what we played until
that's awesome.
When we were at my house. When I would go to my friend's house, I would still play D&D on the slide.
We're going over to play games. That's what we're doing. So funnily that triggered a memory. So my two best friends growing up were both Catholic, and my mom came up with this brilliant idea in her head that whoever's house you stayed at, you had on Saturday night to play role-playing games. You had to go to church on Sunday. And her thought was, well, I'm going to take Adam and James to church with us, on Sunday. But I ended up 2 out of every 3 weeks in mass with them, which is probably kind of where this whole thing kind of started for me, at least, theologically.
What's going on here? Oh boy, that had to be just a very different experience for an Assemblies of God kid.
Wildly. Well, luckily for me, it was. I mean, it completely was. I was a fish out of water, and I've asked for forgiveness because I was not always gracious as a young teen, encountering new things in Catholicism, and then having been raised Assemblies of God. And, there is a current of anti-Catholicism in kind of evangelical spaces. But my grandfather,
and it's specifically anti-Catholicism too, because it's weird. Because my mom, who's like, she hasn't stayed Assemblies of God the whole time, but she's still in the like general Pentecostal part of the evangelical world. So like all of her churches are like very Assemblies of God adjacent, if not Assemblies of God itself. And so she has recently been asking me about the Orthodox Church in Tacoma that's about 90 minutes away from her house. And I'm like, it's like, I'm trying to figure out a logistical plan that would make it possible for her to go. She's not, I know she can't stand for the length of an Orthodox service. It's just like, she's not physically capable of it. So I'll have to find out like, what kind of accommodations they can make for her if she goes, and then we would probably have to drive her so she could check it out. So I'd have to go with her, but she still is just as anti-Catholic as ever.
Yeah, it's weird.
So it's really specifically Catholic.
Yeah.
So
no, it is, and but thankfully, my grandfather, who I was very close to growing up, he was one of the associate pastors at our church. He's like, well, you can ask me any questions you want. I'm like, well, what do you know about Catholicism? Being the precocious and antagonistic young man that I was, he's like, well, so my grandfather he was raised Catholic. Went through everything to be a Jesuit monk. And right before he took his vows, he went home, and my great-grandfather, who was a very hard-drinking, abusive from all accounts, atheist, had found Christ in the Assemblies of God Church. And after spending the week home with his dad, my grandfather went to the local Assemblies of God Church and said, send me anywhere in the world. I want to be a missionary for you. And ended up being a missionary in South America for like 30 years because of the change that his father went through because of the Assemblies of God Church. So my grandfather like knew Catholicism inside and out, was able to like walk me through and like debunk, well, they're not praying to the saints. Here's what's going on. And so he was a very loving and patient man. And
yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's cool. That's very cool. Yeah. So you started with the supers at some point in high school. You discovered D&D. Yep. You also experimented with the riffs. When did you first dip your toe into design? And what was it that, I mean, almost every gamer does at least plays around with it.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much almost universal. But you actually like did it well enough that you actually have had some publishing credits to your name. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
What got you started?
So my very, it's the weirdest story. It was in high school. Final Fantasy III had just come out, and my family, we were not able to afford console, kind of game systems. And one of my guys and friends in my gaming group had it, and I was watching it. I was like, "This is great. This is like a role playing game." And he's like, "Well, why don't you take the strategy guide home?" Because he didn't need it. And so I poured over this Final Fantasy III strategy guide. It had all the items and it had all the classes and the progressions and the monster stats. And my first design was, well, if I can't buy a Super Nintendo and a game to go with it, I'll just adapt what I'm seeing here into a role-playing game. And so I made a little D100 game that used all of the stats from the strategy game, so that at any point I could just flip to a monster and go, okay, well, if here's the stats in the game, I can run this in a little combat here with my friends. And it wasn't great, but we had fun with it. I think we played it for about 5 or 6 sessions, and then went back to riffs because that was our game. And when I went to college, I think I ran it once or twice. But I had gotten into D100 games because I found my first Glorantha book, and I was a huge into mythology growing up. And I got the Cults of Terror book, which is all about the chaos gods in Glorantha. And I was, again, never could find a core book. So a lot of it was, all right, well, they have all these stats. What could I do with monster stats to...
Yeah, right.
So reverse engineer RuneQuest, which I never was able to do.
Yeah, RuneQuest is like one of those games that like I really have always liked it from afar, but I can never get enough people to want to play it. I keep buying copies of it. I have multiple copies of RuneQuest on my show.
So I do a little show with a friend of mine called Exploring Glorantha, where we're trying to do like the Glorantha 101 course, like what is, and every episode turns into 3 or 4 episodes because it's just so deep and rich. But I think it was John Wick, the game designer, was like, listen, if you come up with an idea, Greg Stafford had it about 30 years ago, and he explained it better than you did. Like, there are no new game ideas, mechanically interesting game ideas. They're all things Greg discovered in
Greg is pretty unique. Yeah, like I mentioned before, I had a very brief correspondence with him, like late 2012, early 2013. Shortly, like not long before he passed, and then I got really sick. But I was bouncing a project that I was working on at the time off of him, and he seemed to think it had some promise, so that was encouraging.
That's all. He was an amazing person.
He was really cool to me. He was just nothing but encouraging. I actually shared the same project with one of the games that you worked for is 13th Age, and I had a friend who was also writing for 13th Age, And I shared the same project with that friend, and their feedback was far less constructive and kind than Greg's. So yeah. Anyway, I got sick and I never finished it. I empathize. I'm one of those people who I'm like that guy who has like a million ideas, and it's like I get bored with my own idea in the middle of it and like don't finish it. So the only things that I've ever finished is like there was a while where we were experimenting with this thing where we would just decide spontaneously to run a game about, on some random thing. Let's say like we want to run a game where we're a Paleolithic tribe, right? Or Mafia or whatever. Right. And I would just like write these little micro games. Like I would literally do this on my lunch break at work. I would write like a 6-page micro game to fit like whatever the scenario was, and then we'd go and play it. This was in my 40s.
Oh, it's awesome.
I was doing this. I was working for the Department of Health in public disclosure. My brother-in-law was working there too, and we come up with an idea for what we were wanting to do, and I would just like come up with these micro games during lunch, and then we try them out. I kind of like they were basically all like they were all basically working on the same basic set of mechanics, so I would just rewrite it really quickly to fit like whatever the new thing was.
Yeah, focus it in on the genre. So,
yeah. They were very simple like D6 dice pool games, but some of them were fun.
Hey, I mean that's always my advice to people. You write your game for the people that you want to play your game. Like, don't write it for everybody, right? So that's awesome. Yeah, that's a huge mistake because like there's no game that's for everybody. No matter how much.
Just like there's no genre, like there's no genre of film that's for everybody. Not everybody likes action movies. Not everybody likes westerns. Not everybody likes romance. Why would it be any different in the role-playing game world?
Well, and the fact that we seem to have forgotten, right? You can please some of the people all of the time, or all of the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time.
Right.
And a lot of media is trying to please as many people as possible, and it ends up just watering it down to where nobody is enjoying this.
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, I would rather write.
Well, a lot of the corporate games are not actually trying to. They're trying to please as many different types of people who are different from their traditional core audience as possible, while ignoring their traditional core audience.
Right. I think people forget the. So I subscribe to the iceberg theory of social media, which is only the 10% most vocal and angry people are on social media at any given point. So like 90% of the people playing Dungeons and Dragons are having a happy, great time around the table with their friends, and they're not talking about Dungeons and Dragons. The people who are talking about Dungeons and Dragons are, third and fourth standard deviation out from like where the majority of the tradition.
Well, and often I don't, and also a lot of like particularly some of the more toxic online conversation. I don't even know how much those people are playing.
Yes,
as much as they're just like theory crafting on a whiteboard and yelling on the internet.
When we had forums, so forums for our younger audience were right. You encountered these people that they're Gnostic gamers in the fact that they've never played, but like it became real big in the 3rd edition era of Dungeons and Dragons because that like the internet was really taking off then, and they would post these builds or they would post these hypothetical situations, and when you pin them to the wall and say, well, did this actually happen at table? Well, I don't have anyone to play with right now. So this is all like, intellectual exercise. And I think those people found an audience on social media.
I think so.
They're just, but I also think on the flip side, that's why actual plays are as popular as they are right now is because there's still a large segment of the gaming population who's like, well, I don't know who I would play with.
Well, and then also so many solo play, so much solo play content. That's like the big thing. It's like I have mixed feelings about that. Like on the one hand, there's some good to it. I think like the idea of solo play, using solo play as like a design tool for yourself. If you're the kind of gamer who even tinkers with design, that's promising. It could actually generate some good ideas as a design tool. But it is definitely like the idea of solo gaming as a replacement for what happens even around an online virtual tabletop is not.
I am one of the great things about gaming is it's one of the few activities we have left in our modern world that one is not consumptive, right? Everyone at the table is pouring into it. But the other thing is, what do we have left where people gather around and share food and sit down and like spend time offline or, online, but, ignoring everything else? Because I have 2 games a week that I run.
Well, let's be honest though. Let's be honest though. Like the online thing, it's like it'll do in a pinch if you don't have another option. But okay, I don't want to I don't think you're bad. You might be in a situation where you moved and all your friends are somewhere else and you still want to play with them. There are reasons to play online. I'm not making a general blanket criticism of online play, but I think I can say that and also acknowledge that online play is clearly inferior to the in-person, fully embodied at the tabletop experience.
Yes. My Tuesday group is in person, and I get to play on Wednesdays with friends scattered all across the country, and I love that game. I would not trade that Wednesday night experience for anything.
Right.
But if I could just magically teleport them all to the table, I would do it. 11 times out of 10, because just being around the table, being in the presence of people, it changes the dynamic. It changes the way you talk and relate to each other. There's far less, I'll say misunderstandings or, it's just embodied is a great word for it. There's every year there's fewer and fewer things that we're willing to set time aside to gather and do, and I love that gaming is one of those things.
So my son and I are both big on the in-person gaming thing, and my brother-in-law is like a little bit. I don't know how much he's being serious or how much it's just him trolling, but he definitely he acts as if he thinks that online gaming is superior. And he's and he'll say things like, yeah, what? So you can just smell everybody's farts, So, and he's the one. He's about 90% trollo. He's the one who actually refers to me or refers to Richard as younger, better Nate. Which I just have to say is because he's it's true. I can't, what am I going to say? Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we are a lot alike. He is younger and he is better than me in every way.
When I discovered Richard was 10 years younger than me, I was like, thank you, Lord, for this lesson in humility that you were putting me
through. Yeah. God bless Richard.
Oh, he's a great person, and it is one of the great joys of my life that he lives 7 minutes up the road from me.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
All right. I'll have to come and hit you guys up next time I'm in Texas.
Hey, if you do North Texas next year, I go.
Oh, I will. The only reason I'm not going this year is it's right on the heels of my daughter's getting married this weekend.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and so I'm actually really nervous. I don't know why I'm nervous. I'm not about getting married, but I am. All right. So. She's getting married this weekend, and it's just it's just too much. I don't want to daughter's wedding and then go to a con.
That's fair.
I didn't want to do that to my wife. It's so yeah, had to skip this year, but definitely next year. Although my son is talking about my son is maybe wanting to go to a different con next year, so we'll see, but there's a chance we'll end up in India.
Well, let me know.
So
we'll go do church.
So your first foray into design, your is inspired by Final Fantasy 3.
Yep.
And then when was the first time that you did something that you said, "Hey, like this is good enough that I want to share it with the wider world"?
So I had been posting on a now defunct blog that I had, and I was doing reviews and talking about my gaming process and just using it as a sounding board to write. And I had started a podcast about 13th Age. And in Colorado Springs, where I lived, I was good friends with this gentleman who owned a gaming store, and he got tasked for one of our local conventions to put on a little gaming side of things. And he was like, "Hey, do you know anybody?" I was like, "Well, I just met Tim Brown, who did Dark Sun, and he's got Dragon Kings coming out." And Cam was like, "Hey, can you get Tim to come out?" And so Tim came out, and we were talking about his Dragon King setting. And he liked the ideas that I was talking about what I was going to use for my campaign. And so he asked me to write a campaign for it. And so I wrote up an outline and I sent it to him. And he's like, "Well, hey, I'll pay you to do this." And it has never come out yet, but it was like my first paid writing gig. And
oh, that's interesting.
Tim is Tim Brown. Like, he worked, for GDW Games, and he did Dark Sun. And he's like, "Hey, this is good." And about that same time, my friend Ben, who introduced me to Richard, was like, "Hey, somebody's looking to write this setting for a fantasy spy game. Would you be interested in it?" And it was for Fate, which I'd never written before, but they were going to take care of the mechanics. So I wrote this Cold War spy setting set in the realm of fairy. You were all descended from the children, the human children that the Fae had stolen.
Yeah.
Those were your ancestors, and now like the magic had infused you, and there was this Cold War going on between the Seelie and the Unseelie courts.
Oh, very cool.
And that, like, those two things kind of gave me some confidence to do some more public writing and some more professional writing. Tim eventually got enfranchised with Ulysses Spiel, who does the Dark Eye and Torg Eternity and Fading Suns. My wife got hired as an editor, and I ended up getting hired to do streaming. So I ran a 3-year Fading Suns campaign that was based off the Divine Comedy, and I thought it was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But that's kind of where this came from. And so my first real, like, my thing was Jackals, and that came about because a lot of people were like, "How do you get in the gaming industry?" And it's like, well, you kind of fall into it. And looking back, I can definitely see God's hand in the whole thing, because I get this phone call from Tim going, "Hey, are you guys going to Gen Con?" I was like, "No, we're not going to Gen Con. Like, I'm working for a medical device consulting company, and my wife's at Starbucks, and we've got a 2-year-old. I'm like, "No, we're not going to Gen Con." He's like, "If I paid for you to go, would you go to Gen Con?" I'm like, "Well, now I'm listening." And Dark Eye was coming out in the, for the English speaking market, which is Dark Eye is the German D&D.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Huge in Germany.
Yeah.
And they needed people to man the booth. So my wife and I learned Dark Eye and then drove to Gen Con, and we manned the Ulysses booth that year. And we had a Torg Eternity poster that people were really excited about. And some people would say as luck would have it, but I think providentially, the booth next to us was Osprey Games. They had a bunch of the Osprey books, but they were just putting out board games and such. And I struck up a conversation with Phil, the guy who was running it. And we were talking about history and theology and philosophy, and I was telling about this new game idea I had. And we talked every day for, a year, and he was asking me questions about the game, and I was getting real frustrated. I was running it in Axe, and I love Axe, but it wasn't a good fit for what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so Phil was like, "Hey, well, if you were going to design your own game, what would you want it to do?" And I had never thought of that, because I'd done homebrewed settings and I'd done house ruling, but I hadn't really designed anything since college. And so I thought about it for a weekend, and I was like, "All right, Phil, like, if I was going to do it, here's the things that I would want it to have." And he was like, "Awesome. I want to send you a contract, and you've been talking about this game to me for a year and a half. I love the idea of the setting, and if you've got a rules idea, we want to hire you to make this game a reality. That's where Jackals came from, and it allowed me to put my master's in theology to some use. I had hopes of becoming a pastor, and that just got.
So explain how your master's in theology helped with the work on Jackals.
Well, so I did a master's of theology in biblical languages and ancient Near East cultures. Mm. So I was reading.
So this is like the setting for Jackals is inspired by that part.
It really is. It's inspired by kind of three places. I had my D&D setting that I've been running in for 20 years. My original goal was if it exists in Dungeons and Dragons, it exists in this world. And we just wrapped up a huge campaign of it, and I was getting kind of burned out on kind of I used to call it Gygaxian fantasy, and that's not fair because, at this point we're several iterations away from what Gygax kind of put down.
Yeah, and Gygaxian fantasy has the thing about to me the thing that is distinguishing about Gygaxian fantasy is that there's something about Gygaxian fantasy that it's a little bit more wild. It's a little bit more wild and open, and it's got a lot more like Western and sci-fi elements in it than you think.
It's a lot more Howard and Clark Ashton Smith.
Exactly right.
Than it is.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
And a lot of I think a lot of what goes on in that game D&D is pretty far removed from Gygax at this point.
Well, and I was talking about this with somebody earlier this week, and if you go back and look at the design posts that Monty Cook and Jonathan Tweet and Skip Williams, I think it was Jonathan Tweet who really said that they made the conscious decision with 3rd edition. Essentially, so we had Appendix N in 1st edition, and then in 2nd edition, like you couldn't read the classes without being like, well, if you want to play one of the Knights of the Round Table or Charlemagne, play a Paladin, or if you want to play Beowulf. And like I got introduced to these names and these stories through 2nd edition D&D. They made the conscious decision to make D&D self-referential in 3rd edition, and I think that was fine in 3rd edition.
Yeah.
But it became so self-referential that you started to have people coming into the hobby, which was their goal, who knew nothing about D&D but the self-referential D&D. I think that's why we have a huge explosion of the OSR and this.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because people were like, well, wait, this came from something. It can't be a self-referential. It can't be an Ouroboros. Like, it had to start somewhere.
Yeah. I would say of published games that are out there, I think the one that is like doing the best job of presenting what I would consider a Gygaxian flavored D&D is Cyberborea.
Oh yeah, 100%. I have that on the shelf right there. It is.
Which is the game I'm running next.
I ran a great Hyperborea game.
Yeah.
But my son was looking at the books when they came in, which is why. So we did, like I said, we read through Tolkien, and then he very early on, I was the only dad who got called into the toddler Sunday school to be asked what a Narlethotep was, because they're all running around playing superheroes, and Zane was like, well, I'm Narlethotep. And I'm like, So we read through all of Lovecraft, and then we read through Howard, and then we just finished up Dunsany and Smith.
Nice.
And so like he's primed for like Hyperborea.
He's getting educated in the true classics.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to spend almost my entire allowance when I was a kid on Savage Sword of Conan.
Oh my God, that was such a great comic. Savage Sword of Conan. So in a very because Savage Sword of Conan was not a not a kid-friendly comic, but
no, it was not a kid-friendly comic. I probably really shouldn't have been doing that, and my parents definitely did not know that's what I was. But I would go to 7-Eleven, I would get a Slurpee. I would get a Slurpee and a Savage Sword of Conan, and the newest Savage Sword of Conan, and then like have enough left over to get some French fries at the the drive-in.
So I don't know if you're an Elric fan, but Titan Comics is putting out Elric comics, and they really feel like the Savage Sword of Conan.
Oh, I'll have to tell my son about that because he's a huge Moorcock fan.
Oh, and they're doing Hawkmoon next. Like Hawkmoon comes out in June, and I'm thoroughly excited about that. All right, so there was, it came from my love of like ancient Near. I'm reading the Baal cycle. I'm reading Mesopotamian myths. I'm seeing how the prophets are in the Old Testament are really reacting to these stories in ways that we didn't really understand until we found, Ugarit and found the Baal cycle. So we discovered, Baal's a thunder god. So suddenly everything about the Elijah story makes so much more sense when you're like, well, God, why did God say, well, no more rain? Well, because Israel was going to Baal going, hey, give us rain. And God's like, well, then I'm turning everything off. And the fire from heaven, the lightning bolt, it's all the motif. Or my favorite is in Isaiah, when Isaiah basically is like, why are you guys worshiping Baal? Our God swallowed death. And it's like, okay, well, that's impressive, but why is that important? Well, if you read the Baal cycle, Baal gets eaten by death, and the other gods have to petition death. And so Isaiah is literally saying, our God ate the God that you're worshiping. Why are you paying attention? There's a lot of smack talk in the Old Testament when you kind of read some of this stuff. And I wanted something that was like personal. Like I wanted something that like reflected where I was in my faith and in my beliefs, a lot like, Tolkien started, Middle Earth with. And so that's kind of where Calypsis and Jackals came from. And the system was very much based off my love of RuneQuest, and I built it on the open D100 system that my brain just died. I think it's Monkey Blood Designs put out, which is a great system, but it didn't really fit the way I wanted it to, because I was reading the Iliad and it suddenly struck me that it's not like Hector's waiting for his turn, right? Like Hector and Achilles, they're clashing violently back and forth,
right?
Or if you read Herodotus, right, they're talking about, or Xenophon, and they're talking about the armies and how large they are. I'm like, well, that would never work in Dungeons and Dragons because the scale is too off. And so I wanted something that felt like a Bronze Age spear fight. And so I essentially came up with a meta currency called Clash Points, and they've evolved beyond just what I originally had. So you can they come back at the start of your turn. You typically have between 4 and 6 of them. Mm-hmm. And on your turn, you can spend them after your roll to get like a power attack or a sweeping attack. So like you can feel super awesome on your turn. But between when your turn ends and your turn starts again, anytime someone attacks you, you can spend a Clash Point to turn it into an opposed roll. And if you beat their roll,
I'm actually familiar with the way the basic mechanics of the game work. By the way, I think it's a good design.
Thank you.
Because I experienced it because Richard's using the same basic mechanics for his Amboria game, which I was in a playtest for.
That's awesome! You were in one of the Night War.
I only got to go to one session because I had a conflict, but I enjoyed the one that I was in. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that both Richard and I discovered running Clash was that because you have to be prepared to defend yourself at any point, it alleviates some of the, well, my turn's over.
Yeah.
I'm going to check out until my turn comes back around. And that was an unexpected design benefit.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the way combat can work when it's run well in Pendragon, which also doesn't really have a fixed initiative system. It has a closed resolution.
I adore Greg Stafford. I'm going to a convention. I leave in 3 hours to go down to San Marcos, Texas for ChupaCon because I'm running a bunch of Savage World stuff down there. But
Nice.
I know that Chaosium is going to be there, and they're going to have the Game Master's Handbook. So
yeah, I just got my copy of the Game Master's Handbook for 6th edition Pendragon earlier this week, and I pre-ordered it. Actually, no, I guess I got it last week. But then my son decided to cancel his Pendragon game. He was getting burnout.
No.
I know. So now we're doing a series of one shots until we figure out what the group wants to do. He ran. I mean, to be fair to him, though, like he'd been running it for over a year.
Okay,
it's not like he just like it's not it's just like the thing with him is like we were getting like he ended it like at the beginning of the Boy King period.
Okay.
Because like the pre-Arthur stuff is more his thing.
Okay.
It's like once Arthur's on the throne, it's like, I'm not. He's not, and he was honest about it, and it was obvious he was losing interest. I'm like, just be honest and tell the group that you're like getting burnt out. We're ready for the next thing. He's working on his own design project, and that's taking up a bunch of his energy. And he very much wants me to run Hyperborea.
It's a good game.
The other thing, it's like he wants to play for a while, and he definitely is like. I know he's pushing behind the scenes to engineer it so that what we end up doing is my Hyperborea.
So I cannot highly recommend if you've got any of the modules, like the Anthropophagy of Zimbala is an amazing. It's very heavily inspired by, I think it's People of the Black Circle, the Conan story where Conan goes to the caravanserai and they try to come in and kidnap him, and he finds out there's this cult of cannibals out in the desert. I mean, it's very. I mean, that's the hook for the adventure.
I have this reputation of like having never being able to run a module straight. Like,
you've got to tinker and
yeah, I know. It's like, this is my brother-in-law. It's one of the things that he likes to poke fun about. Like, the last AD&D campaign I ran, which I ran for a long time, like almost 2 years actually.
Awesome.
The last AD&D campaign I ran, I did a riff on Keep on the Borderlands, and one of the things that I added, I added in a bunch of stuff. It was not remotely similar to the original source material, but the thing that really got him, thing that really killed him, is that there was actually an underground sulfur lake behind the kobold caverns, where the kobolds were actually feeding this black dragon that was like in the sulfur lake. And
that's awesome.
So they ended up stumbling into the sulfur lake and all dying, and it's like that's not a Keep It on the Borderlands.
But that's the joy of role playing, right?
Yeah.
It makes sense, and therefore, as a GM, you can put it in there.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. Yeah. If we're not here, if we're not going to be imaginative, why are we doing this?
Right. Right, and that
was kind of my son's thing, because he'd been running the Great Pendragon campaign. That's like, the campaign is getting too railsy for me. I had more room to introduce my own ideas earlier, and I'm like, but you've seen me run it before, and it's like, I don't stick to what's there on the page.
Yeah, modules are great. I'm not as much of a huge fan of like the giant adventure paths or giant mega campaigns,
right?
As much as I used to. I still run. I'll still pull Night Below or Rod of Seven Parts off the shelf, and I'll run it in any game system because I love. But those are so open.
Oh, I don't hate them. I don't do much. I
have to tweak them because
there's one. Probably it's weird. I've never met anybody else who really likes this adventure. But there was an adventure for Mongoose Publishing's Conan 2E, which was like a D&D 3.5 based version of a Hyborian role playing game, and I ran that for a long time because I'm a huge Conan fan.
Oh yeah,
that's why my son wants me to run Hyboria, there was an adventure for that called Betrayer of Asgard that I absolutely love. And the reason I love it is because I have a tendency to start because I'm a huge Conan fan, and I'm so inspired by that kind of fiction. I have a tendency to start my campaigns and my sessions and Mania Race. Right in the middle. It's just in the middle of the shit, and then we'll figure out what's going on after the fact. And Betrayer of Asgard, actually, the beginning of the adventure is that you've stolen the horn from this Jarl, and the shit, and you're buried in the snow, and there are people are surrounding you trying to kill you. That's the beginning of the adventure.
That's awesome.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, did you ever try the 2D20 Conan?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
I've got all of those books.
Yeah, I have all of those books too. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I've never met a Conan game that I didn't like. So
yeah. Trying to think. Well, TSR put out a really bad Conan game about 82, 83.
I've never met that one, but
right after the movie, that was pretty garbage. I bought that too because Conan.
Yeah, I know GURPS had a Conan book.
GURPS Conan is more of a source. It's not anything. It's just a source book for
all of GURPS books are basically just.
Yeah, I mean it's still GURPS. You know, there's actually an Earth of the New Sun source book.
That's how I got
GURPS.
Introduced to Gene Wolfe. Like that.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I was like, "What is this?" And when I went to do it, I was like, "Well, I have to find this book."
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So, what projects do you have that are on the horizon?
Well, we've currently got a Strange Owl partnered with a company called World's Largest Gaming, and we're bringing back the World's Largest Dungeon. That's on on crowdfunding right now. It's going to wrap up next week.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen the ads for it.
Excuse me. Yeah, it's going well. I wasn't involved in anything but just getting the team together to do the transcription work.
Right.
But we're going to do Dragon Kings this summer. Mm-hmm. We are working on getting Emboria out. The good news is Thunder in the North is in editing, or came out of editing and is going into layout. And the first book is coming out of layout right now. So if you're a backer of Emboria, within the next month, you should have a update that says, hey, here are the final PDFs minus a couple of art pieces of the first book and the edited text.
That's awesome.
That was so before the campaign ended, I was hospitalized with bacterial meningitis and almost died. I'm still kind of recovering from that. And then several months later, Richard got very, very ill, and it took him probably 8 months to get back to where he could just start working on this. And when we were getting back into it, then the artist that we had for Emboria got into a car accident and suffered a pretty traumatic brain injury. And he's now fine, but it feels like every time we were getting momentum, something. So please hear us. It's coming out. I can't wait for this book to be out. It's going to be beautiful. I'm seeing the layout pieces for the core book, and it's amazing. But we're looking forward to Dragon Kings, and we've learned some things. So Dragon Kings is in editing right now. So the manuscript is going to be through editing. Art is being ordered. So when we go to crowdfunding for Dragon Kings, it's going to be to finish paying for the art, and then the book's going into print. But Dragon Kings is kind of Tim's homage to Dark Sun. He tried for several times to try and get Dark Sun back from Wizards, especially when Wizards was like, we're never going to do anything with it. And
I wonder why.
Yeah. So he basically did a reimagining of it. Like, what would so if Dark Sun is set several hundred years after this ecological disaster, Dragon Kings is set a couple of decades before that disaster becomes irreversible. And so the idea is the heroes have a chance to stop the world from essentially going down the Dark Sun route. But because it's Tim and he's been in the gaming industry for so long, it feels more like that early Gygaxian stuff. There is a lot of science fantasy in there.
Yeah.
And so we've got to I designed a 2d6 almost Traveler-esque system for it, and we've play tested the heck out of it. It's going through another development pass. I do a lot of writing for Savage Worlds now.
Okay.
I wrote an homage to kind of the 70s and 80s era crossover comics over at Marvel Comics. So I have an adventure called The Return of Dr. Destruction, where this guy, Dr. Doom-esque character, is trying to steal the power cosmic from this beyonder entity and ascend to godhood. And the heroes have to stop that. And they like that enough that I'm writing another superhero supplement for them, which is cool for me because, like you pointed out, I didn't come to gaming in kind of the stereotypical path. So Supers is my AD&D. It's when I get nostalgia for my early days of gaming, I want to play 4-color, superhero.
I came through the most stereotypical path imaginable. Well, I told you part of it already, but it's like, well, I had been reading Tolkien.
Yeah.
Like that's what, so I had read and my very first character that I made when I was playing with the neighbors, when I was taught how to play, I named Aragorn.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Although, to be fair, Gygaxi and D&D is less inspired by that and more inspired by the kind of weird
True
fiction we were talking about.
Yeah, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, Clark Ashton Smith. Yeah, it's interesting to me that we associate Tolkien, or most people associate D&D with Tolkien today, and it's very clear that it wasn't. But it's right around the time, I think I'm not the first person, I think, to make this observation. I know I'm not the first person to make this observation. But it's really when Dragonlance came out, and you had this sort of very linear story, and you had the party that very closely sort of resembled the Fellowship of the Ring kind of moving through this story, that I think that was a watershed moment for Dungeons and Dragons. And suddenly we went from this kind of modular, Conan-esque, where, hey, what are we doing this week? To, well, we could tell.
That's true.
The Lord of the Rings kind of story. And I mean, I like the Dragonlance novels. I thought the modules were so on. I mean, there are points in the modules where they say, and if the players don't do this, the world ends, or something like. You had to keep them on those rails. And I think as Dungeons and Dragons became more associated with Tolkien, and at least in the cultural mindset, I think it's probably because the game switched from running adventures and modules like a Conan story to, hey, I want to tell this story that, this.
That was one of the things that I think that was one of the things that the Mongoose Conan game got really right, because one of the conceits of that game was that players could begin the session with any set of equipment and all their money would be gone because it's the genre. You're broke again. It doesn't matter how much treasure you got.
Yeah.
The last session, you're broke again. You're broke again, and your gear is whatever I tell you it is.
I'm glad.
Let's do the next story.
I'm glad you bring that up, because I reread a lot of Conan, preparing to do the design work for Dragon Kings, and that's actually a rule that we came up with.
Oh, there you go.
Your treasure doesn't move between sessions, and basically at the start of each new session, you reset to kind of any of your starting gear plus anything that
which was actually a mechanic in early D&D that was working against what it wanted to do in terms of the fiction by tying experience to gold.
Yeah.
You make it small, although Gygax did try to make sure that he was very clear that the economy should be basically a gold rush economy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the weights of the size and weight of gold pieces in D&D, they're not modeled after historical and ancient coins. They're modeled after the American gold coins.
Mm-hmm.
And so his thought is that you just have an economy that is such a boomtown economy, and you suck money from the players so much that no matter how much they get, it's going to be gone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
but it doesn't. But very few players like enforce all of the rules that would cause that to happen. You know,
well, I know we never played
upkeep, training, all that stuff. So, but it's all there.
Building a stronghold. That's why you're saving all this money. Like,
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, it has been really great. I just want one thing, like since we do have a little bit of time left.
Sure.
One thing I would like to get into is, if without giving too many spoilers, because it hasn't come out yet. Give me a little brief sketch of the piece that you have coming out about the liturgy of role playing games.
Okay. Well, when we were, when the submissions kind of went out. I think my initial pitch for the paper was of Dice and Myth, because there's this great Greg Stafford quote that is, role-playing games activates a critical human process that has been nearly killed by over-rationalization and materialism. Role-playing is a way for humans to interact with our deep, hidden mythological selves. They're a way to feed our soul. And that really resonated with me. And so I was I want to do a paper on how role-playing games feed our soul. And as I got into it, I was reading some N.T. Wright, specifically The Meal That Jesus Gave. I was reading For the Love of the World, which is an Orthodox book. And what I was noticing is there is so much about role-playing games that has a liturgical component to it. And what I mean by that is, I had a professor who said, we're not Homo sapiens. We're not creatures that think. We're Homo liturgicus. We're people that do. And when he's like, it doesn't matter what you're doing, eventually humans will develop a liturgy, a set of traditions around it. And he points to, cheeseheads in Wisconsin, right? They get dressed up. They show up at the same time. They get together as a group.
What is the key question that makes a role-playing game work in the first place? That the DM is always asking the players, or the game master is always asking the players.
Yeah, what do you want to do?
What do you do? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
That's how the game works. That is the core mechanic of the game, right there. Yeah.
Any of them. And so as I was going through this, I was like, well, hey, think about it. I'm going to say an ideal situation, because as you said, we've got virtual tabletops now, and we've got solo plays. But in what I would call the platonic ideal of a role playing game, you are gathering weekly with your friends. You're sharing a meal of some sort, whether it's a snack, or some of us, sometimes we would actually do meals beforehand. You're sharing food. You're sitting down. You're developing. This
is where I am the greatest of all time when it comes to the games that I host.
What do you do?
I used to be a chef, so the food in my games, it's legendary.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's legendary. So it's it's very good. My gaming group is well fed, and we have a big table. We have 8 to 10 typically.
Oh, that's awesome. So every year, and I think this year we're celebrating the 10th anniversary. This was back when Richard and Ben had mentioned that they've never really played Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, well, we're going to play some 5th edition D&D then. Come on, let's go. And so we had a monthly game. And I was like, well, hey, we used to do this all the time, in my Rifts group. Why doesn't everyone come up to my house for a weekend, and we're gonna play D&D for 3 days straight? And this has turned into what we call TPK, Total Party Con. And every year in October,
nice, love it.
For the last 10 years, the group descends, and I smoke ribs, and we do, we go all out. So they're here from Thursday to Saturday night, because everybody, either wants to fly home or go to church on Sunday.
Spares, linebacks, beef back ribs, plate ribs.
I do baby back ribs.
Okay.
And then this year, I think I did my hand at doing pulled pork, and it turned out really well. So I'm gonna do some pulled pork, and we just make food, and we hang out, and we drink whiskey.
So you just stumbled into one of my other obsessions. So now I'm gonna ask what kind of cookery you have.
So I have my wife, when we moved into our house in Colorado, bought me, she got this great deal on a grill that goes, the left side of the grill is propane.
Uh-huh.
And so it's got a sear and then the propane grill, and then it's got a charcoal side, but it's got a smoke box on it.
Okay.
And so I think it's a Smoke Master.
Okay.
And that thing is, the propane side is getting to the point where I'm like, I'm going to have to replace that, but I can't replace the smoker side because that thing's so well seasoned. It doesn't matter. I've gotten to the point where whenever I smoke ribs, I'll do chicken wings first, because as the grill's coming up to temperature, those chicken wings only take like 2 hours to smoke. Yeah. And then we're eating chicken wings while the ribs are on. And then
there you go.
And I mean, there's also like nothing like it where, for $30, I'm getting 2 pork shoulders and I've got 20 meals of meat after we've eaten through everything.
I became obsessed with barbecue not long after I became obsessed with gaming. A little bit older. So I started cooking for my family at the same age, at 11.
Okay.
I started making Mexican food. That was my first thing, was Mexican food. Mm-hmm. So, and my grandparents, I lived with my grandparents for a good chunk of my childhood, and my grandparents both really liked Mexican food, so I did that. But then when I was about 15, I saw the Great Chefs of the West Texas Barbecue episode, and it's like, oh, what the heck? So my granny was from Huntsville, Alabama, and my mom is from Cullman, Alabama.
Okay.
And my grandpa is from Oklahoma. And like, I'd heard my family talk about like the barbecue back home my whole life. And then I see this Texas barbecue episode of Great Chefs of the West. And it's like, okay, I need to learn to do that. And so I did. And so I cooked my first brisket not too long after that. I had to here's what I had to do. This was like the mid 80s.
Okay.
The mid 80s. It's like I couldn't go to Home Depot and buy a smoker.
Right. No.
Right? Okay. So I was able, like, Kingsford had just started putting out like mesquite charcoal, and I was able to get a hold of some apple chips. And then what I did is I cooked only the flat of the brisket the first time, because that's all I could find.
Okay.
Because I live in Washington State, and Texas barbecue isn't a big national phenomenon yet. It's the 80s, and I live in Washington. I had to go to Olympia, which is an hour away from where I was living, where I grew up. I live in Olympia now, but I grew up in Aberdeen, which is about an hour away, closer to the coast.
Okay.
I go to Olympia, I buy a brisket flat. The grill we have is a hibachi. Okay. I took the grate of the hibachi and I put it up on top of cinder blocks to get it about 18 inches away from the coals.
Yeah.
And then I tented the entire thing with foil, making sure that I still left airflow to keep the smoke in during the cook. And then I just would go out and refresh the coals like every 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And until that brisket was done. Considering how much ingenuity I had to use and how crappy the equipment I had to cook on, I actually think even that first brisket turned out pretty okay.
Yeah, but when you're smoking, it's hard not to. I mean, even bad, like your first couple of times, like my first brisket was a complete disaster compared to where I'm at now. But you know what? It was delicious. Everybody ate it.
Yeah, you did. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it got much better more quickly. And then it's like I was able to get my hands on a Weber kettle.
Okay.
And then I would just bank my coals on the kettle on the opposite side, put a water pan, and and cook indirect on the kettle.
Yeah.
That way, and I was able to start, getting access to better wood. But I got my first real smoker. I got as a wedding present.
Oh, that's awesome!
And in 1999, I got a Brinkman's S&P Pro. That was my first like real Texas style offset. But I've been cooking barbecue all along just on the Weber kettles that I have. And then I've been doing it ever since. Like, and I was actually working as a chef for a long time in my early adult life. And so I would bring in barbecue samples to like my boss. You know, I was working as a sous chef at this bistro, and I would bring in barbecue samples to my boss at work. The chef of the restaurant I was working, and like we would actually talk about. We never got around to doing it, but we talk about putting a smoker in the back so we could have barbecue to the menu because he liked my barbecue. But yeah, and then I started doing, and then after I moved into, I transitioned careers, but I did barbecue catering on the side for a long,
that's very cool
for a long time. So I kept getting progressively bigger and more smokers. So I currently have a pellet grill that I never use, two drum smokers that I built, and my new baby is I have a Lone Star Grills cabinet smoker that'll hold about 16 briskets. That is so good.
My dad got one of those, and it's pellet fed, and it's, you know, he can control the temperature and see the, you know, he's got meat probes in it with the Wi-Fi, and I tell him that's cheating, but that's only because I'm so jealous of his setup.
Yeah.
I'm out there like an hour beforehand getting my different chimneys set up for all of my coals, because you know, when you're like, I'm soaking wood chips because I got to put them onto the, onto my iron box on top of the coals so they all feed through. Yeah. And I'm like, there's something nice about being like, well, I woke up at 4 and then I just turned the thing on and put the meat in and I went back to sleep. I'm like, you. Yeah,
mine is not mine is, it's a cabinet smoker, but it's charcoal and wood.
All right, so you still have to like.
I mean, I could get a PID for it if I wanted to like auto control the temperature and blow a fan. But I like the process, and it's not like, it's kind of like once you got used to using it. What I tell you what, when I first got it, the temperature got away from me when I first got it, because it took me a while to figure out that you needed to like start closing down your vents about 75 degrees before you hit your target temp on that particular unit, or you would just way overshoot it. So I had like, it was like basically like on the second, by the second use I had it down. But yeah, that's pretty much what I mostly use now.
Very cool.
It's fuel efficient, so I don't even for smaller cooks, it's not like, oh well, I'll just use one of the smaller smokers. It's like, no, it's so fuel efficient. It makes sense to use for any size cook, whether I'm cooking for a big crowd or if it's just for a family dinner.
Very cool.
So, and my gaming group often gets to partake in the barbecue. So, like I said,
the gaming, like I think this year I want to try my hand at Carolina style pulled pork. I love that. Yeah. So I think So my catering specialty when I did barbecue catering was actually whole hog cooks. Really?
Yeah. And so I had a cinder block pit that was on my sister's property that she let me have there, and then I would transport the pig to the event site into my tow behind offset. And we would just run that like at hot holding temperatures, like 140 to 150 degrees.
Yeah.
Just to hold it. But I would actually cook it because it just cooks better on the cinder block pit.
Oh, it's so cool.
For whole hog. I mean, there's a reason why they're still building those things in the Carolinas. Like they're really efficient for cooking a pig.
Yeah,
they retain heat really well. You don't use very much fuel. It's a laborious process though, because I would do it like I would do it the really old-fashioned, difficult way, which is that I would pre-burn all of my wood down to coals. Okay. So I would have a burn barrel with a hole cut for a shovel that you could fit in the bottom, and then I had run rebar through the barrel so that as the wood burned down, the coals would fall through the rebar and collect in the bottom. And then I would just shovel those coals from my secondary burn pit into the cinder block pit.
Okay.
And you replenish the coals every 30 to 45 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And you run like around, for a pig, you want to run around 275. And then flip it over toward the end and crisp up the skin.
How long does
not as long as you would think.
Yeah, that's just what I was wondering.
It actually takes less time because of the convection nature of the device you're cooking it on.
Yeah.
It takes once you're actually up to temperature and rolling, it's about 7 hours for, say, a 75-pound pig.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah. No, it's actually it's less time than a pork shoulder.
Yeah.
A pork shoulder is going to take 16 hours. No, easy.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. Well, you're running hotter.
That's true.
on a hog cook.
Yeah.
So you're running at the higher end of the barbecue range when you're cooking a hog. Because the reason you want to run at a higher temp is because you want those really nice crisp cracklings.
Yeah.
And the skin gets leathery and tough if you cook a hog too low and too slow. I've seen a lot of pictures of really hogs that were really poorly cooked online. It's like, wait, you did this 24 hours at 200, and it looks black because you've over smoked the pig. That ain't how you cook a hog.
No.
So
well, now I know
you want it to be nice and you want it to be nice and like rosy brown, like polished mahogany. That's what a finished hog should look like.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was most of the orders I got were for whole hogs because I was the only one in the area cooking them.
That's very cool, though.
Yeah, it's funny, and my wife is Jewish. We had before we got married. We had a no hog song in the bathtub rule because my son told her the story from when he was little of where I had ordered a hog that was supposed to be fresh, and they gave it to me frozen. So I had to rapid thaw it in order for the job, and it's so I had to clean out the bathtub. And then put it in the bathtub on ice to thaw it. So he got up in the morning and he goes to the bathroom, and there in the bathtub, he sees this pig on ice, thawing in 45-degree water.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
So, yeah. So, I don't know. Yeah. Well, okay, you got me talking about barbecue. That's what
No, that's okay. I'm here for
it. All right, so let's get back to. I want you to be able to finish your thoughts on the liturgy of gaming.
Oh, well,
food is a part of it, so hey, it's not that much of a complete sidetrack.
No, I mean, listen, if the Beowulf poet can put digressions in, then by God, we're in good company. So, and then as I got into it, I mean, obviously, for me, Tolkien is so important. So, it's in part a discussion of kind of the liturgy of gaming and the fact that we develop the traditions and we develop, sort of, I don't want to say a secret or a cult language, but we do each gaming group has their own. Yeah,
for sure.
Right. Memories that we're, calling back to, where we're stepping outside of time like we believe we do when we approach the table or engage in any other mythological kind of thing, because obviously time is very fluid in a gaming setting. Seconds can stretch out for hours, right? Or we can cover multiple days. And then I tried to tie it back. We'll see if I succeeded. The editor had me rewrite some sections, but I think I tied it back. I tied it back to On Fairy Stories. And how
we've been doing a series. Well, I haven't been able to participate much, but my friend Eugene Terrican, who is actually his Substack is dedicated to that's what he writes about is the Inklings.
Yeah.
like a lot of Barfield, a lot of Tolkien, and he translates the work of the Inklings into Russian.
Oh, that's
so he has a really his understanding of the works of the Inklings is really good. And so he joined us for this series analyzing Tolkien's On Fairy Stories essay.
Oh, that's awesome!
And they just recorded the third part, because it turns out it's like, I was like, why does Sherry want to do a series on this? It's only 45 pages long or 46 pages long. And then I started reading, and I'm like, oh, that's why she wants to do a series. It's like, you can talk for an hour after every paragraph of this thing.
Yeah, it's so deep. So I get back to his thing about recovery. The idea that fairy stories provide this recovery and this escape for us. And I'm like, this is what gaming does. And now if I were to rewrite the paper, I would add in that, like, kind of what we talked about this morning, that like for young men, gaming provides that. It sates that desire for exploration and for struggle,
and it gives them a healthy, safe way to practice what it means to be a man.
Yeah,
and then to play around with being different kinds of men, and to see where that leads and what happens without there being like really terrible real life consequences for that.
Well, and I'll butcher a Lewis quote, but Lewis talks about in, I don't remember where it was at. I apologize. I needed another cup of coffee. But he's like, when he's talking about reading books, how the joy for him of reading books is that he is able to see through 1,000 pairs of eyes and yet remain himself.
Yeah, exactly right.
I was on another podcast yesterday. We were discussing grimdark fantasy. Yeah, and I think my explanation of why I read grimdark is, I think it's another benefit of gaming, and it's the idea that, and this I'll completely attribute to Richard and his fireside chats about Dante. But there's a moment in the Inferno where Dante is about to encounter the Medusa, and Virgil. It's the only time that Virgil says, "Cover your eyes, don't look, don't listen." Like, right, do not look at the Medusa has become a phrase around Richard's circles of, hey, don't give in to despair. Don't look at something that will cause despair, because there are some things that participating in are so, they'll turn you to stone. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like grimdark fantasy, and I'll argue that the same point for gaming allows us to look at the Medusa through the mirror. It allows us, like you were saying, it allows us to say, what actually happens here? Yeah. But not in a real thing where it could actually like damage our souls or our minds. Right. It allows us to wrestle with darkness and real weighty things in a very kind of safe, and especially when you're playing with friends, a very safe and loving space. That's right. I'm not advocating for D&D as therapy, because I do not think you should put that on your GM, but it can be therapeutic.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. It's actually my daughter. My daughter does work with autistic children, and she actually designed a role-playing game that she does use as an exercise with her kids, that the school district was able to approve. It's like,
that's good.
It has to have like no violent action, no violence of any kind, that in order for it to pass muster with the school district. But like, it's still like the people that she worked with often, the young people that she works with often, still find it engaging and helpful. Cool. And it kind of helps them develop social skills. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, not talking about imagination or any of the other things, like the benefits of gaming, right? We learn to interact socially. It teaches, basic math skills most of the time when you're adding up dice. It's teaching you to like work as a group. Yep. It ends up look at all of the writers and directors who are like, well, I got into all of this because of gaming. It taught me how to how to write and how to put together things and stories and what the importance of narrative. I'm like,
absolutely.
Yeah. I'm the guy who, anytime we're playing a board game that takes longer than an hour to play, I'm like, why aren't we just playing Dungeons and Dragons?
Like, that's how my son is. My son is the same way. My son is the same way. We also have this friend who, like, we have this one of the legendary stories of our group is like, I was actually not there for this, but because I think I was working, but there was a game of like Descent, I think it was.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law was like role playing, like actually role playing during the Descent game, and this mutual friend of ours, Abe, just like lost it. He's like, you can't. There's no role playing in Descent or like whatever.
But why not? My buddy tried to get me into Gloomhaven, and we played the first, like the first two sessions or first two missions, and he's like, what did you think? I'm like, well, it was fun, but we could have been playing like an actual role-playing game this whole time, and we would have had all of the tactical combat that you love and all of this other stuff that is so nurturing and like life-giving to me. Like,
I'm with you. Yeah, I do love other games, but I mean, they're like the other games that I like are like they're. I'm not big into like fantasy board games. That's not it. Like, but like I'll play like, like my stepdaughter, she's 20, and like the only one of our games that she likes and will play is Dominion. So I play a lot of Dominion with the family.
Yeah.
And I like war games, but I prefer war games mixed in with my role-playing games even better.
Even better. Adventure Conqueror King with Domains at War. At our last TPK, we were playing 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, and Richard showed up with the mercenary company that the group had hired, and we actually like had a combat that felt a little. I made up war game rules on the fly because I'm not a huge battle system fan. And we were able to like play out this siege.
That's actually one of the strengths of AD&D is it actually doesn't need the AD&D rules are written so that the same exact once you've cracked the code,
yes,
the same exact rules that you use in small skirmish engagements and in a combat are the rules that you use in mass combat.
Yep.
And all you need to do is just scale up the numbers. That's it.
Exactly.
Doesn't change mechanically at all.
And that's essentially what I did. And man, have you tried? So the two war games that I'm into right now, Richard and I, we have our armies painted. We just are both so busy. Oathmark,
okay,
which is an Osprey game that you start by building a map. And the way the map works is everybody gets a capital, and that tells you what your core units are from. But then if I have say, hey, this is river country next to my capital, and you have ways of building the map, but it's like, okay, well now I can recruit, river trolls into my elf army. But if Richard takes the Riverlands from me, like we fight a bat, he's like, here's where I'm attacking you, and I lose that, he can now recruit river trolls into his army, and I can't.
Oh, okay.
And the other one I really like is Conquest, because it's 38 millimeters, so like the models are bigger.
Big, yeah.
But it appeals to me in all of the ways that like we were talking about today. So I play Old Dominion, which is essentially undead Byzantine Romans, and I play City States, which are clockwork Greeks. And so I have hoplites and phalangites, but they've got like clockwork arms that have replaced like wounded. So they're historical adjacent with this fantastic overlaid on it.
That's I've always been more of a historical kind of guy, but that does sound fun. I will say
it's a great time.
It's something that has like if at least if something at least has a flavor of history, and like the mythology is something like that I can identify as being like, okay, this has some real something to it. I can see where they got this.
Yeah.
then I'm okay. Then I'm okay with it. It's just when they make up like really dumb stuff that it's just like, go read some mythology and try again.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, this has been so much fun.
Thanks
Do
for having
you go by JM or
I do go by
John?
JM. Yeah.
All right, JM. All right. Well, JM, this has been a blast. It was really good to meet you.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk again.
Sounds good. I would love that.
Yeah. All right. Have a great day.
You as well.
Thank you for joining me today on Grill Country.